President Museveni on the 11th of March 2023 arrived in the People's Democratic Republic of Algeria for a 3-day state visit at the invitation of his counterpart, His Excellency Abdelmajid Tebboune. The Ugandan president was received at Houari Boumediene International Airport by his host, His Excellency Abdelmajid Tebboune. President Museveni was later treated to a red carpet reception inspected by a guard of honor mounted by the Algerian Land, Air and Navy forces, and also received a 21-gun salute. Among the high-level government officials receiving the president were the president of Algerian Parliament, Salah Goujil, the president of the First Room in Parliament, Buhari Ibrahim, the Algerian Prime Minister, Ayman Ben Abdelrahman, and the Army Chief of Staff, Said Jengria. On the Ugandan side were Ministers Francis Mwebesa, Trade, Industries and Cooperatives, Harriet Ntabazi, State for Trade, Dr. John Chrysostom Muyingo, Higher Education, Ruth Nankabira, Energy and Mineral Development, John Mulimba, State for Foreign Affairs, and Frank Tumwebaze, Agriculture, Animal Industries and Fisheries. On his second day in Algeria, President Museveni was received at the Presidential Palace in Algiers and held bilateral talks with his counterpart, His Excellency Abdelmajid Tebboune. President Museveni expressed the need to fast-track economic integration in order to facilitate modern prosperity of the African people. He noted that modern prosperity is based on the production and sale of goods and services, a reason as to why since 1980, through the Lagos Plan of Action, the African leaders realized the issue of economic integration. The president said this should be followed by infrastructural development and commended Algeria for having moved ahead on that front by building communication linkages through the Sahara to West Africa. He, however, underscored the need to boost Africa's purchasing power with an expected population of 20 billion people by 2050, up from the current 1.5 billion people. President Museveni was happy to learn that, like Uganda, Algeria's imports have significantly reduced from $62 million to $32 million.
The common market of Africa, which is now 1.5 billion people. However, by 2050, the population of Africa will be 2.5 billion. It will be the biggest population in the world. If their purchasing power goes up, of course the purchasing power is still low because Africa, although the population is 1.4 billion, but the total GDP of Africa is now 3.5 trillion, which is still small. Smaller than Japan. Japan, one country, has got a GDP which is bigger than the whole of the African continent. But this is temporary. This is because people are still not aware of what to do. Our experience in Uganda is that these African populations who still live in the old ways, in the old pre-capitalist ways of producing only what you eat. You produce what you consume and you don't bother with the market. Once you work them up, the production will go up, and we shall definitely overtake those countries, Japan, even the USA, we shall overtake them. It's just a question of waking up our people. So therefore, in the meantime, apart from the continental efforts, the CFTA, which is moving, although slowly, we have the bilateral which we discussed. You had Your Excellency telling you about a delegation which is going to Uganda to look at the opportunities, and we are going to look at areas of the milk. I think the milk is already being traded, the powder milk. I was amused recently when there was a war in Europe, and then people in Africa were saying Africans are going to starve because there is a war in Europe, in Ukraine. I didn't believe that myself, because in Uganda we have got a lot of food. Uganda is not part of that group which will starve because there is a war in Europe. The war is not in Uganda, the war is in Europe. It's not. Yes, there may be a shortage of wheat, but we have got alternatives to wheat. We have got very good cereals, millet, cassava, bananas. These are sources of starch which are even richer than wheat. So therefore, the problems of Africa are really ideological and strategic. People not knowing what to do. Otherwise, everything is there, and I'm glad Algeria is in the way of the way Uganda also thinks. His Excellency was telling me that imports into Algeria have reduced from $62 billion to $32 billion. This is very good. Uganda exports very, very little food. We don't export any food. Instead, we export. We are big exporters of food. We don't import except rice, except wheat. That's the one we don't grow. Otherwise, everything else we grow ourselves. So therefore, in Algeria, we have got reliable partners. We are looking at powdered milk, which is already coming here. Looking at coffee. Uganda is a big producer of coffee. We're looking at tea, looking at products from Algeria, the ones of petroleum and petrochemicals. And we are looking at Algeria investing in our refinery. As His Excellency mentioned in his statement, we have discovered some good quantities of petroleum, and we want to build an inland refinery. You know, that Africa is very huge. From the ocean to where Uganda is 1,000 miles if you go through Tanzania, and about 800 miles if you go through Kenya. So an inland refinery, a refinery inside the continent, is absolutely necessary because it will cut out transport costs from far away from the ocean. So this visit has been very productive. I'm very grateful for the scholarships which were given by His Excellency. And cooperation in other areas, including counter-terrorism, because we have got very good experience here, and we have got our own experience. So I thank His Excellency for inviting us, and I thank the people of Algeria for being so hospitable to us. Thank you so much.
On his part, the President of Algeria, His Excellency Abdelmadjid Tebboune, welcomed his Ugandan counterpart, Yoweri Museveni, and promised continued good working relations between the two countries. He pledged his support to Uganda in hosting the Non-Aligned Movement Conference next year, 2024, in Kampala. The Non-Aligned Movement is a forum of 120 countries that are not formally aligned with or against any major power bloc. After the United Nations, it is the largest grouping of states worldwide.
Our endeavors, common endeavors in this context, and in this context, we express our support for Uganda in preparing the 19th edition of the Non-Aligned Movement that will be hosted by Kampala at the end of this year, and the group 77 plus China. In this framework, I would like to praise your support that you brought, that Algeria will organize a preparatory meeting for the non-aligned movement in next summer, in June or July. And Excellency the President, I would like to express through this forum to express the stable position of the Republic of Uganda to be in solidarity for the decolonization movement of the Western Sahara and defending the Palestine state for its liberation. So we have the duty with the African leaders to intensify our efforts, to double our efforts, collective efforts, in order to have more political and material support for the Palestinian and Western Saharan people, and inviting the international community to assume its historic responsibility and to enable them to their independence and self-determination at the end.
The two presidents witnessed the signing of memoranda of understanding and agreements between the two countries. The MOUs included one between Uganda National Oil Company, UNOC, and Sonatrach of Algeria, others in the areas of tourism and trade, education and scientific research, and energy. The agreements signed included agriculture and animal health. Earlier, President Museveni visited the Military Museum of Algeria and commended the North African nation for fighting colonialism, adding that the whole of Africa had been colonized by 1900 except for Ethiopia. The museum manages, coordinates, controls the works, preserves, and exhibits all objects that concern the Algerian military history. He also visited the Martyrs Monument that was opened in 1982 to honor the 20th anniversary of Algeria's brutal and bloody war for independence. This impressive concrete monument is a testament to the country's long struggle to defeat colonialism. On his third day in Algiers, President Museveni met a team of investors under the Council for Algerian Economic Renewal led by their president, Kamel Moula. President Museveni urged Algerian investors and businessmen to take advantage of Uganda's profitability by building and locating production facilities in the country, which has got all the required raw materials that just need value addition.
On behalf of the Ugandans who are here today, and those at home, I greet His Excellency, the President of Algeria, and the brother people of Algeria, and thank His Excellency for inviting me and my delegation for this state visit. The visit gives us opportunity to discuss bilateral issues between our two countries, and also the future of Africa, which has been under attack ever since 1453, when the Ottoman Turks captured Constantinople and blocked the Western countries from the overland route to the east that had been pioneered by Marco Polo between 1271 and 1295. That act by the Ottoman Turks was wrong, and the Europeans justifiably started looking for a sea route to the east, trying to go around the massive African continent and also going west, hoping to reach China through the west. Those efforts by the Europeans to get a sea route to the east gained dramatic success when in 1494, Christopher Columbus arrived in the new continent, as far as Europe was concerned, known as America. And additionally, Vasco da Gama, in 1498, went around the southern tip of Africa and landed at Natal on Christmas Day, 1498. Hence, the name Natal, which means being born in Latin. These exploration trips by the Europeans to look for a way of beating the blockade of the Turks would have been justified if they did not quickly degenerate into slave hunting expeditions. The first African slaves were taken from Morocco at Cape Blanco in the year 1444, according to some of the records, and were taken to Portugal. That slave trading went on for 378 years until 1822, when some groups in the UK worked for the abolition of that evil trade. The slave trade, however, was replaced by colonialism and the physical occupation of African lands by foreigners until 1994, when the Africans liberated one of the last occupied lands, South Africa. Up to now, however, there are some islands in the oceans that are occupied by the foreigners. In the last 579 years of Western aggression, Africa has suffered the evils of slave trade, colonialism, and neocolonialism, leading to massive dislocation of African peoples, death, and enslavement that are still going on today. The suffering that is still going on today in Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, Libya, Central African Republic, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Nigeria, Somalia, etc., is in one way or other linked to the last phase of these 6 centuries foreign aggression. This is the phase of neocolonialism. In all this suffering, however, the Africans, especially the leaders, the chiefs in the past, and the political leaders after the flag independencies of the 1950s and 1960s, are also culpable on account of failing to organize the African people to defend themselves against these rapacious evil forces. Where this is done, we succeed and move forward. The ANC of South Africa was formed in 1912. This was the first resistance movement led by nationalists following the shameful total capitulation of Africa by 1900, except for Ethiopia. And this founding of the ANC led to the eventual defeat of the strongest bastion of the occupiers in 1994, the liberation of South Africa. Here in Algeria, a heroic struggle was waged by the FLN that led to the victory of 1962, Algeria's independence. A free Algeria, to take another example, trained 250 Mozambicans, from whom a group of 48 was selected, and those are the ones who launched the war against the Portuguese on the 25th of September, 1964, that led to the defeat of those insolent imperialists that had occupied African territories for almost 500 years. Algeria, Nasser's Egypt, Secretariat's Guinea, Nkrumah's Ghana, Modibo Keita's Mali, worked with initially the three frontline states of Mwalimu Nyerere in Tanzania, Kenneth Kaunda, Zambia, and Seretse Khama in Botswana. Where we work together, we succeed. The imperialists, both in the past and today, cannot defeat us if we work together, work correctly, and stand for just causes of the African peoples. Algeria, therefore, working together with East Africa, of which Uganda is a part, creates a very strong cluster for economic development, as it did for the anti-colonial struggle in the past. Following the victories of the African peoples in the wars of decolonization, and starting with the Lagos Plan of Action, 1980, the African leaders realized that in order to deal with the issue of African prosperity through the sale of goods and services, we have no alternative but to integrate the African economies in stages leading to the formation of one African Common Market, CFTA in today's way of speaking, Continental Free Trade Area. The logic is as follows. If you produce goods or services, but nobody or only a few people buy, how will you create prosperity? Secondly, if you do not create prosperity through the sale of goods and services, how else will you create prosperity? Can you create prosperity sustainably for the peoples of Africa through begging? The answer provided by the Lagos Plan of Action was to create prosperity through the integration of the African market so as to support the African wealth creators. And who are these wealth creators? The farmers, the manufacturers, the service providers, etc., with a big market that would absorb what they produce. Although the logic is uncontestable, some actors do not grasp it clearly. Hence, you get delays in implementation because of this lack of the grasp of this imperative. Like in the anti-colonial struggle, it is crucial that even in this struggle, those countries whose leaders see this imperative should be the new frontline states for economic emancipation. Even for strategic security, we need this Pan-African effort, as was the case with the decolonization efforts. Our ancestors succeeded in the anti-colonial efforts in spite of having less capacity than what we now have in terms of education, infrastructure, economic development, the development of the armed forces, etc., etc. Recently, I asked the following question. Are the present generation of African leaders determined to build a Latin America in Africa or a United States of Africa in Africa? The two American continents had a similar history of colonization. However, with their breaking away from the colonial control, the two continents took different paths. The North integrated politically and economically, while the South remained balkanized. After 200 years, we can see the difference. Prosperity and strength in the USA, and poverty and weakness in Latin America, in spite of the huge natural resources in that continent. These natural resources are in the form of fresh water, minerals, forests, etc. The problem there, as it is in Africa, is ideological, strategic, and organizational. To answer the question, how should we politically or economically organize ourselves to support the wealth creators of Africa or any other continent? Provided we get them an integrated market, the Ugandan wealth creators, the farmers, the manufacturers, the service providers, individuals, and companies will provide a lot of coffee, tea, milk, beef, fish, forest products, maize, bananas, electric vehicles, electric motorcycles, fertilizers, cocoa, cotton textiles, footwear, and leather, pharmaceuticals, and vaccines, etc., etc. The Algerian and other wealth creators have similarly long lists of products they can provide to the African and global markets. That is why the CFTA is so crucial, and so are the bilateral trade relations like those between Algeria and Uganda. Salutations to the people of Algeria and good health to His Excellency. It is for these reasons that we are happy to be here, so that we push for the further emancipation of the African continent, together with all our other brothers and sisters that fight for the legitimate interests of the African people. Salutations to His Excellency and to the Algerian brothers and sisters. Thank you very much.
The president of the Council for Algerian Economic Renewal, Kamo Mula, informed President Museveni that the private sector is playing a key role in the Algerian economy, with plenty of family-based private multinational companies leading in the domestic market and are ready to share the knowledge and the know-how with Ugandans. President Museveni welcomed them to Uganda and commended their strategy of private companies working with government. The meeting was attended by Ugandan and Algerian dignitaries present. Before concluding his visit to Algeria, the president held a meeting with the Algerian Minister of Energy and Mines, Mr. Mohamed Arkab, together with the CEO of the Sonatrach, Mr. Tofik Habka, and their delegation, where discussions hinged on opportunities in oil and gas development in Uganda. The meeting was also attended by the officials from the Uganda's Energy Ministry, led by Minister Ruth Nankabirwa. He also met Algeria's Minister of Agriculture and Rural Development, Mr. Mohamed Abdelhafid Hani, and his delegation over animal vaccine and animal production and exports between the two countries. The meeting was attended by officials from the Uganda's Ministry of Agriculture, led by Minister Frank Tumwebaze. On the 14th of March 2023, President Museveni returned home from a successful 3-day working visit to the Democratic Republic of Algeria. This was the president's second visit to the North African country after the first one in October 2015 at the invitation of the then President Abdelaziz Bouteflika that saw Uganda open its first ever mission in Algeria. Uganda and Algeria enjoy warm and fraternal bilateral relations with strong regional, continental, and international cooperation, especially through regional and international organizations such as the African Union, AU, the African Continental Free Trade Area, AFTAC, and the United Nations.